It's okay to build wealth. It's okay to create success in your business world. The Good Samaritan wasn't broke. And if we're going to fight evil, it helps if you've created some resources that allow you to do so. Don't think that just because somebody's rich, you're all of a sudden going to be pulled that direction. However, the more money you have, the more success you have, the more power you have, the easier it is to be susceptible to some of those energies of pride and arrogance and greed. And so it's vitally important as you continue down that road of pursuing success so that you can do good with it, that you become aware of how those things are showing up in your life.
Let's talk about change. The truth is, nothing changes unless you change. And if you want to step into your full potential, you need to surround yourself with the right people. That is exactly why I have created the InPowered Life community. Within this community, I'm going to be teaching you the exact same mindset and energy practices that I have taught my clients that are paying me well over six figures, including CEO owners of billion-dollar organizations and professionals at the very top of their fields. You're going to get access to 2 live virtual calls every single month with me, where we're going to dive into mindset, energy practices, spiritual principles that are going to help you thrive in every area of your life. Can't make a call? No worries. We're going to provide you with a recording so that you can catch up anytime. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity for direct coaching from me and to learn from incredible guest speakers who are going to share their best practices and growth. Remember, you become the people that you spend the most time with. So why not spend time within a community that is going to elevate you and your life? For an introductory $499, you're going to get a full year of support and coaching alongside high performers who are committed to expanding their careers, their growth, their finances, and to elevate their overall quality of life. Just click the link in the show notes or log into rudyricksteins.com to lock in your spot and start your transformation today. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston Ricksteins, and this is the InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Ricksteins. I'm your host, and today we are joined by Paul Hutchinson. Originally, Paul made his name in investments. He built an incredible company called Bridge Investment Group, which from my research says they have around about just under $50 billion in asset management. In addition to that, he is the executive director of one of the highest grossing films at $250 million to date, Sound of Freedom. This is a film that highlights one of the largest child rescues in history, with over 127 children that were liberated from that single trip itself. Paul has been involved in liberating over 5,000 children from sex trafficking. This is no doubt going to be one of the most profound conversations that you're going to hear this week. I'm glad that you have found this episode. If it is your first time, welcome. If you come every week, we thank you. We love you. But today I would love to shine the spotlight on this incredible man, incredible work that he is doing in the world. And he is only just beginning. Sir Paul Hutchinson, thank you so much for joining us on the InPowered Life Podcast.
Thank you, Rudi. Incredibly grateful for you putting together an amazing audience and my opportunity to share today.
Matt, Paul, I started when you and I were talking off camera, just saying, man, it is an honor to have you on this show today. I want to give you some more context. I like to give our audience context. I'm constantly saying to them, I'd like to pull back the curtain and show a little more for you, but I would like to do that for you today. In preparation for today's interview, and I've followed you for, I want to say, over a year and a half now, just in what you're doing, the impacts that you've been creating. And so I'm not new to you and I'm not new to your work, but in preparing for the interview today, I've just been filled with so much emotion. I've cried 3 times today, and I'm not an emotional man. I sat at my desk just with a lump in my throat. I have a podcast recording studio at the other end of my home with a film studio, and so my wife can come in and out at any time. And I was sitting in my studio preparing, And she came and she said, would you like to have some soup for lunch? And I couldn't even eat. I just had so much emotion in me in just reviewing the work that you've done in the world. And I would like to focus a little bit in different aspects of who you are, and then the work that you do, and where that work is taking you. And so for the benefit of the audience, I would like to start with where they've most likely met you, if they've met you, socially speaking, and that is in this unbelievable movement that you've been a part of. Uh, you've been a part of 70 different missions where you've gone undercover. You have supported, as I'd mentioned in your introduction, in freeing over 5,000 children. And those were only 5,000 children that were captive at that time, not even what the potential of what they could have continued to do had you not put these perpetrators away. You have dedicated 10 years of your life to doing something when you didn't necessarily need to do it. I would love to start by just asking you, somebody who has created unbelievable wealth, and you are very wealthy, you have stature, you have success, you could buy and do and be anything, to then put yourself in such incredible harm's way, to risk your life, your family, your everything, in the pursuit of something so beautiful and bold. And we can all sit and listen and say, man, I aspire to that. I am proud of him. But we don't all get up and do what you did. And you have so much to lose. Why did you do it?
I'll answer it this way. When I first got a phone call from a Homeland Security agent who had asked me to come not only to help fund rescue of some of these children in Colombia, but they needed me to play a part. And I quickly agreed. If you remember the movie Sound of Freedom, when Jim Caviezel is trying to figure out how to make all this work, and he's like, you know what, I can pull this off if we can convince Pablo. And Pablo was the multi-billion-dollar fund manager who chose to quit his job and go help rescue children. Well, I'm Pablo in real life, and when I got that phone call, in real life, I quickly agreed. Yes, I will be there, and I'll tell you more about where the picture of the little girl came in, et cetera, later. But my business partner John called me about an hour later, and he said, "Paul," he said, "I've heard what you agreed to do." Now, John was the co-founder with me with a company called Bridge Loan Capital that morphed into Bridge Investment Group Partners, which, when I retired, we had over 4,000 employees in the firm. And we were doing very, very well at the time. And he said, "Paul," he said, have you thought through this?" He said, "This is incredibly dangerous." He said, "You're set. You could retire. You could buy an island. You could be happy the rest of your life. Why would you do this?" And I said, "John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought another plane, if I bought a third helicopter? I mean, would that really make me happy?" I said, "Tell me this, if I was doing something else dangerous tomorrow, if I was climbing Everest, you and I would have the same conversation, wouldn't we?" He said, "Yeah, we probably would." I said, "And when I'm 95 years old and I'm looking back on my life, and I say I climbed this mountain and I built this multi-billion-dollar company and I helped rescue this many children, which of them matters at all?" And John said, "Yeah, I understand." He said, "If your talent, if your background, if something about you can help with the rescue, even if it's just one child, it would be worth it." And what had happened, and if you've seen the movie, you'd kind of understand this. And here's the truth: we put about 8 different rescue missions together into one storyline, and about 20 different operators. It would be bad for me or anybody else that's highlighted in the movie to say, "Oh, the movie is about us." It's not. I mean, there were other people that helped to fund it. There were hundreds of operators that were involved in that and the other missions that we put together. In fact, the jungle scene was an entirely different country. It was we were after a little boy, not a little girl. It was in the jungle dressed as doctors. There was a lot of different things that were all put together. But what was true is that and all of those things happened. They were just in different scenarios. What did happen in Colombia was that the head trafficker was actually a male, not that there was a woman that was working with a modeling agency, but this male trafficker named Edouard. And he had a piece of property he wanted to develop into a child brothel sex resort. He needed a few $1 million to build it out. He believed he could make tens of millions of dollars a year selling children to wealthy Americans. And he had about 14 children that he was controlling on his own and renting, but he had access to a bunch of other ones. And we needed to get him to call the other traffickers and get them to bring all the children to the same place at the same time. And that way they could do a sting and they could rescue all of them at the same time. And what the plan was that I would show up. And now, of the 70 missions later, I was Paul Stone, Paul Steele, Paul Black, Paul, all of these different aliases. They didn't have time to set that up. I went down as Paul Hutchinson, the multi-billion-dollar fund manager who knew how to make real estate deals happen. And I was to go down and meet with these traffickers, convince them that I'm willing to fund their project under one condition. We're going to have a party in a few weeks. I was going to bring a bunch of my rich friends. They were going to bring all of their inventory, all of the children that they were trafficking at the time. And if I was impressed with what I saw, then I would fund their project. Rudi, this ended up being the largest child rescue mission that we had ever done, over 120 children. And two things changed my life. Well, there's a number of them later, but the two things over this mission. Number one, the very first day I'm sitting with these traffickers and one of them leans forward and he says, "Pablo, I have a gift for you." And I'm like, "What's your gift?" And he hands me his phone and there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. He said, "This is Princess. She's still a virgin. We just took delivery of some. She's my gift for you for this party," and started talking about horrific things I could do to this child. And in the movie, my character is like, I don't want to go. I mean, it's way too dangerous. You don't have the government involved, etc. And it wasn't until Jim Caviezel gave my character a picture of this little 11-year-old girl, and then it written on it, "Forget about the 50 plus children. Do it for the one. Rocio, sold at 11 years old," is what it wrote on there. And in real life, I was already there. I was sitting face to face with these traffickers, and he shows me his phone. And it was at that moment where I knew for a fact that I was looking at a picture of a trafficked child, 11 years old, being offered up to me by these hideous individuals. And I thought, how is this a thing anywhere? Now, I'm going to touch on something real quick because we're going to go into it later. I thought that when I first met child traffickers, they would be, tattoos on their necks and earrings in their noses and thugs. And, the first trafficker I met was a businessman. White polo shirt, clean shaven, well-spoken. The second I met was a female, a beautiful woman, ran a modeling agency, was seducing these children to come into it. And I thought, these aren't traffickers. These don't look like what I would think traffickers are. But over 10 years of undercover later, and 70 plus undercover missions that I led or played a key part in, I realized there was a common thread. It was not only the loss of those solid divine principles that we really should live our lives by, but a common thread that was not only the traffickers, but the perpetrators of these crimes with the children. That common thread was arrogance and greed and lust. And it was so thick with each of them that it just reeked. And after a little while of doing undercover missions, I ended up having to look in the mirror myself. And I said, "Paul, how is arrogance and greed and lust showing up in your life?" Now, I wasn't doing anything illegal. I definitely wasn't harming children in any way. I was risking my life to save them. However, We all have to ask ourselves how those character flaws are showing up in our interpersonal relationships and in our life and in how we affect others around us. Because that energy will end up negatively affecting a child. I guarantee it, every one of us. When we're operating from a place of lust, and we're saying, oh, this isn't hurting anybody. I'm addicted to pornography, but I'm just in my office and and it's not hurting. Yeah, the very second that you take a woman from a divine feminine to an object, then you start going down a dark road. No, just because you've seen pornography doesn't mean you're going to become a pedophile. Pretty much everybody who's watching us today has seen that. But it's important that we understand how addictions affect us, how looking at another human being with any other eyes other than the divinity of God that is within them, then we are sharing in that negative energy that is creating things like child trafficking. The other thing that changed my life on that first mission was we set up the sting. Our team met with the U.S. Embassy and the Colombian federal agents that provided 40 agents for us, and I think it was even more than that from what we saw. And 4 of them were like our maids, our waiters, and our cooks. They weren't very good cooks, but they were armed, right? 25 of them were there to storm the party at the right time. And we did 3 separate cities on the same day because there was children in all of them. The one that I was in Cartagena, Colombia. And these traffickers had brought 54 children, just like what we showed in the movie. And almost every one of them were under the age of 16. More than half of them were taken from other areas, other countries even. And the children were all in a separate place in kind of inside of this grass hut building. And we were sitting outside at this table negotiating with the traffickers. We had cameras, undercover cameras that were around because we needed to get them to tell us exactly why they brought the children, what they were willing to do. So they couldn't later say, oh, I thought we were coming to a beach party. No. You said right here on camera why you brought these children, what they were for sale for, and how much each thing cost. And so we were having this dark, horrific conversation. And in the book, Sound of Freedom, I go into detail in that conversation. So I even say, at this part, you may want to skip ahead a couple pages because it's heavy. But I think it's important for people to understand that evil exists in this world. The only thing that is required for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing. And we can sit around and we can put our heads in the sand and say, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. There's even people listening right now that are thinking, oh, this is kind of heavy. I might need to turn this off. Guess what? If you live back at the time of slavery in the United States and you had a neighbor that was treating those human beings the way that they did, would you do something about it? People are like, yeah, I would stand up. No, you wouldn't. You'd put your head in the sand and say, I don't want to hear about it. It's important that we understand that this stuff is going on so that we can win, so that we can fight it. Bringing the Sound of Freedom out to the world, we got pushback from every side. 5 years of after it was finished before we were able to bring it out to the people because the system that's in place, and we can go into depth on this too, the system of big Hollywood and big media that have a very specific agenda to take you away from your moral principles. They did not want this to come out because they didn't want to have these conversations. They wanted to keep the people that were at the P. Diddy parties hidden from you and I so that we would continue to go and watch movies with Will Smith in them. We needed to know, we needed to get mad enough where we say, no, this cannot happen. This cannot happen. Our children, God's children, are not for sale. And so at this first event, we're sitting there, I'm sitting on this outside table with these traffickers, having this dark conversation. And one of them stands up and he said, Pablo, I have to show you the gifts that I brought you. And he stands up and he goes in the house where the children are. And because of the construction, we could hear very clearly what was going on in there. And we could hear a few of the children starting to cry. And it took him almost 10 minutes to get these kids out. He brought out 4 children, 1 little boy, 3 little girls, all 4 of them virgins. This is the first time that they were being sold. And they were obviously scared. Back up when we had that first meeting with the traffickers at the restaurant, the female trafficker was putting up an objection saying, oh, we can't bring the virgins. You know, he shows me this picture, this little girl, she's for you for this party. And I said to him, I says, you have more virgins? I knew if we could get them out before they're ever raped in the first place, that would be a miracle. And I said, you have more of those? Oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 more right now. I said, you're bringing those to the party, right? He goes, oh, no. He says, they're too expensive. I said, they're too expensive. I was already paying this guy $25,000 for this party. I'm paying him $500 per child for a minimum of 50 children just for 2 hours in the afternoon with him. He goes, Jefe, you already paid $25,000. You want to F these other virgins? It's going to cost you maybe $2,000, maybe $5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you maybe $10,000 more. I was legitimately pissed. I put my hands on my chest. I said, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He's like, oh, no, Jefe, no. I said, I want every one of those virgins at the party. And they damn well better be virgins when they get there. And then the female trafficker's like, oh, no, we don't want to bring them. And I thought maybe she had some compassion. And she only spoke Spanish. I had a translator that was there that was working with her. And she says, oh, no, we need to desensitize them. We have to show them pornography. She didn't care. She says, otherwise they're going to cry. She didn't care about the abuse of the children. She was afraid that it would affect me and my party goers if they were crying. And sure enough, they're at the event. They bring these children out, and there was tear stains on the little girls' makeup faces. And they brought this one right in front of me. The same little girl that they showed me on the picture. The one that we called Rocio in the movie, the one that they called Princess there at the Traffickers did. And this little girl standing in front of me as I'm sitting down, she's standing up. She's not much taller than I am as she's standing up. And so we're almost eye level. And I could see, Rudi, I could see into her soul. I could, above the makeup tear stains that were on her face, peering into her eyes, all I could see was fear. Her little hands were shaking. And I took her hands. And I just said, I asked her at first, I said, ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? And she didn't answer. Probably because her real name wasn't Princess. And I just said, Esteban. Those 2 words meant the world, hoping that she would know that indeed it's going to be okay. I wanted to just hug these kids and say, you're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents. I couldn't say that. I told the traffickers, it's not time for the party to start yet. We need to keep negotiating some stuff here. You guys have proven to me that you had the inventory. Let's draw out this business plan right now. Let's do this. Send the kids back in, because that was the hardest thing for me in my life, was peering into that little girl's eyes. And at that moment, I made a promise to myself, to God, to that little girl, to children everywhere, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. Half an hour later, the agents had come, stormed the party, arrested everybody. Child Protective Services people were in with the kids, and they began to laugh and sing with the children just to calm them down. And that difference between the crying that we heard half an hour before and that laughter, that singing, that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. I started crying. Turned the operators that was with me. I said, I've spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. What do you need? And that began that 10 years of undercover work. I quit my job, and I was a primary investor and executive producer in the movie Sound of Freedom, because I knew that if we were going to make a movement, if we were going to really make a difference, we needed millions of people behind us. Back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like us. It wasn't the rescuers that created the biggest difference. It was people like you, Rudi. It was people with audiences and influence that made the difference. It was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the media of the age that created an awareness with good people of what was going on in the South. And years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the Civil War." We're not starting a war here, but in reality, it's a spiritual war. We're fighting against the worst evil imaginable. And unfortunately, it's all around us. It's not just in Latin America and Thailand. It's in the US. It's in our own neighborhoods. And we need to be aware of it. We need to all step forward and say, no, children are not ever going to be abused on my watch, in my family, in my neighborhood, in my city. So that's kind of how we got started. Sorry, I kind of ran on a roll and whatnot there. I'll let you kind of lead the conversation, but that's where my journey 10 years ago started, and now 70 million people have seen the movie Sound of Freedom, and hundreds of millions of children are safer because of it. And I am eternally grateful.
Hey, it's Aniston Ricksteins here, and I want to ask you, have you ever wondered if there's more to your life and work than what you're doing right now? What if I told you that the universe is hiring and you were born to fill a role that will bring you true purpose and success? In my new #1 best-selling book, The Universe is Hiring, Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill, I'm going to show you exactly how to step into that role. This isn't just a book full of inspiration. It's a roadmap to help you start shifting into a more fulfilling life right now. You'll get clear on your unique purpose, learn how to align with your strengths, and take actionable steps towards the career and life that truly light you up. If you're ready to make a change and start living the life you were meant for, grab your copy today. Available anywhere you buy your books online, or click the link in the show notes.
For an audience that's listening to this on a streaming platform, if you were to go over to my YouTube channel and watch during this section of 20 minutes of Paul sharing, I just kept saying to myself, Rudi, just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. And no doubt if I go back and rewatch it, I would see my physiological state just taking in, because it's so hard to hear. And I already know your story. I know so much of your story, and the intimate parts of the conversations that shifted, that led you onto the road of where you are and where you're going today. And we won't uncover all of it today, but I will just urge anybody that has felt something in the last 20 minutes that has moved them, if they have found that it is profoundly difficult to breathe because you're hearing something where there is this level of evil that is out in the world, that somebody could insert themselves over somebody else for the benefit of, whether you'd mentioned, whether it's greed or lust and these driving forces behind this level of human behavior. Knowing what is happening in the world today, and just to be on social media, everything is Puff Daddy, everything is Jeffrey Epstein. We're seeing so much of this, and to know that people at the highest level are the ones driving this agenda is what is so alarming to me. And you know, in my limited mind, I would have thought that it would be in poverty-stricken areas. People are selling children because they're in a bad place. But you talk so openly. The demand is at the highest level. You've spent your entire life helping people build wealth, and the people that are the wealthiest are the ones that really create the need for so much of what we're experiencing. But you've also openly shared that, that's not only in such big circles, that we have people that are being trafficked in our neighborhoods, and that there's little kids that are going to sleep in their own beds at night, and that more than 70% of children that are trafficked have a familial family connection. And it just,
it's heartbreaking. I have two young children, both at the age you've mentioned, of Princess. My daughter's 10, my son's 11, and I just cannot even fathom having that level of experience. My question to you really is, you know what? I want to set the foundation first. I knew this was going to be a spiritual conversation. You have been a part of an unbelievable movement. You are very much in the beginning. For the benefit of the audience, if that was hard to listen to and you're thinking maybe I want to jump to another episode that's going to be a little lighthearted, we're going to move this conversation into different areas because I love where you're going now. I love what you're doing now. Rather than being an intermediate solution, you want to go and fix from the root cause. And that's where I want to anchor a lot of our conversation today. But I want to go back to something you said while you were talking. You have met some of the darkest of dark people. You've had sit down face to face meetings with some unbelievably disturbed people that are doing heinous things. And then you said, and this is what I teach, and I've never heard someone else say it in the context that you did. You went back home and asked yourself, where is that in your life? We believe in our teachings that the world is just a mirror to you. If I don't like something about you, Paul, it's something in me I don't like about myself that's being reflected back from you. You sat with somebody who sells souls into sex slavery or, for body parts. I mean, we're talking about the worst kind of people. And you then went home and said, where do I have that? Not same direction, but you have that same thought process, like, where am I being greedy? Where am I egotistical? Where do I have lust? And you were able to self-reflect. Share with us that process a little bit from your vantage point, because I think so many people could learn from that exercise of just being able to turn around and put it back on yourself.
Thank you, Rudi. I think it's important as part of this conversation to understand that it's okay to build wealth. It's okay to create success in your business world. The Good Samaritan wasn't broke. And if we're going to fight evil, it helps if you've created some resources that allow you to do so. So don't think that just because somebody's rich, you're all of a sudden going to be pulled that direction. However, the more money you have, the more success you have, the more power you have, the easier it is to be susceptible to some of those energies of pride and arrogance and greed. And so it's vitally important that as you continue down that road of pursuing success so that you can do good with it, that you become aware of how those things are showing up in your life. It's also important to understand that you can be living in any neighborhood, wealthy, affluent neighborhoods, an apartment complex, anywhere, and you can walk out your front door and look left and look right. There's a good chance that one of those doors or one of those houses is a dangerous place for children. And let me explain why with this. A lot of people leave the movie Sound of Freedom. They're like, oh, I want to do something. I want to go fight this evil. I want to help, And the worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and go try to rescue some children. You're going to get shot. And you're probably going to get arrested. The best thing you can do is go home and look in the mirror, figure out what you need to change about yourself, and go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how is that going to fix, trafficking, hugging my children? Well, the majority of children who are being taken and moved to other places in that form of trafficking, the majority of those children come from broken homes, runaways, a broken foster care program, and doing things that are going to create a healthy nuclear family is incredibly important. In fact, I'm just going to throw this little tidbit out. The average marriage, now I speak from experience, guys. I went through 2 divorces before I figured this stuff out, okay? In the United States, you have a 1 in 2 chance of getting a divorce. Over 50% of all marriages end up in divorce. What if I could tell you that you could do something that would take that from 1 in 2 to over 1 in 1,000 chances of getting a divorce. Would you want to know what that is? And what if I told you that it was something that you could do? Now, if indeed you're trying to prevent a broken family, that would be an important thing to do. If your children have a higher chance of abuse and trafficking, et cetera, in that broken family. Now, I'm going to talk to people who already have those and tell you how to really help your children from that standpoint. But if you do have a healthy marriage and you want to keep that together, and you want to keep that family together, if I could tell you can do one thing that's going to last, it's going to take you maybe 2 to 5 minutes a day is all. They would take it from 1 in 2 chances of divorce to 1 in 1,000. Would you want to know what it was?
Yes.
What do you think it is? Any idea?
I mean, to me, I go back to just having, like conversations, like real conversations with your spouse, with, mirror what it looks like for your kids. Like,
Yes. Number one, have healthy conversations with your children where you can say, they can very comfortably come to you and say, I don't like it when you make me hug Uncle Harry, or I don't like it when I go to this babysitter's house because this is what happens there, whatever else. These are important conversations. Your daughter needs to feel very comfortable coming to you saying, hey, you know what? I was at my friend's house and her brother took pictures of us while we were changing. And now he says that he's going to show them around the school unless we do other things. Things like this is so important that you have that open relationship with your children where they can very comfortably come to you and say when something is off. But the one thing that you can do if you did this every single day with your spouse, that took it from 1 in 2 chances of getting a divorce to 1 in over 1,000, is praying every day with your spouse. Just praying. It's not that the number, the statistic, you can look this up. If you pray every day with your spouse, statistically, they've done studies, the divorce rate goes from 50%, 1 in 2, to 1 in 1,152. Astonishing. And you don't have to have some pretty, our Father which art in heaven. Just say together, hold hands, say, hey, God, thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for our family and help us here and, watch over us here and, watch over our children. And it's super simple. You don't have to have anything flowery. But that one act of praying together every day with your spouse will take it from a 50% divorce rate to 1 in 1,152. So, and again, this isn't a religious conversation. This is a how do we live our very best lives in a state of peace, in a state of love, in a state of tranquility, in a state of fighting this evil. That's how you do it. And I had to get really solid in that space because I was going into the darkest places on the planet, seeing hideous things, and I needed to get solid in that area of my life. And in doing so, it fixed a whole bunch of other things at the same time.
So you've touched on something that I think I want to explore, because we could talk about so many things that the audience would be captivated, sitting at the edge of their seat. But I really want to drive a very particular agenda today, and that is the work that you're doing. And so I want to ask you, if you were going to give advice to somebody that has just watched, or the 70 million people that have watched the movie, or to somebody that has heard this episode and they want to do something as it relates to sex trafficking, they want to take position, they want to take a stance, what would your advice be to the general public?
There's a million things. Number one, start at home, like we talked about. Having healthy conversations with your children. At a young age, they need to know what parts are private. They need to know what's off limits. They need to know that they can trust you 100%. Because here's the thing, it's not just about the 10 million children who are being transferred around and sold into trafficking. It's about the fact that there's 1 in every 4 women that you know have been a victim of sexual abuse or sexual violence as a child. 1 in every 4 women. About 40% of all women at some time in their life, but 1/4 of them, it was when they were children. Now with men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in 5 at some time in their lives, but 20% of them. But the majority of them, it was when they were children. In fact, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. Okay. So here's what's happening. We've got an epidemic of child abuse. And it's usually generational transfer of this abuse. And this is an important principle to understand. And I realized that every single rescue mission that I was a part of, I wished so badly that we could have got to those kids before they were ever abused in the first place, before that they ever had that trauma to hold on to and try to deal with their whole life. And so I thought, okay, what does that look like? How do I fix that? I mean, the only thing would be a time machine, go back 5 years. And what would I do then? Would we pull those kids out? No, the problem is every time, even when we were doing these rescue missions, if not enough was being done to fix the demand, then it left a vacuum. And more children were being sucked back into the deepest recesses of hell to fill that demand. So we have to ask ourselves, where's that demand coming from? And why are the traffickers getting to this point? Now, here's a principle that some people will be mad about, hearing from me. Almost every one of them were abused themselves as children. Now, this does not make it okay. Don't get me wrong. I am not a sympathizer of anyone who ever hurts a child. I've literally put my life in danger hundreds of times to ensure that innocence is not hurt again by these perpetrators. However, if we're going to fix this problem, we, as good, conscious adults, have to take a step back and say, okay, where is it coming from and how can we fix it before it becomes a problem? And here's a staggering statistic. I already told you how many adults that were abused as children. God bless them. Most of them, the majority of them, grow up to be protectors. Most of my operators were abused at some time in their life, and they put their lives in danger together with me to go out and help these kids. However, if not given the love, the help, the healing, the tools that they need, 1 in every 3 will become a contact offender. So it's so important that we help people heal from everything that doesn't belong to us, everything of our past. And there are a lot of tools that we can talk about that are very, very, very powerful in helping people release that. Men are like, I don't want to talk about that thing that happened to me when I was 8 because that thing that happened with my uncle, because if I talk about it, I might be less of a man. No, you won't. You were 8. That was a horrible thing that happened. That from somebody that was holding on to a lot of trauma that took it out on a child. The best thing that you can do is find a way to release that. And you can release that in 1 day, guys, 1 day. Just by talking about it with your spouse, say, hey, this happened. It takes your chances of transferring on that trauma of abusing a child from 1 in 3 to about 1 in 50. And there are things that you can do. You can come down to one of our healing retreats, and it's about a 1 in 1,000. You come in and you find ways to pray, to guided meditation, breathwork exercises, other tools to help you release those things that do not serve you anymore. What I mean by anymore is, a lot of this anxiety, depression, anger issues, whatever else, they might have been protecting tools as a child to protect you against all of that pain that you were feeling, that you were having. But all of that can heal. Everything in our past, things that we have done, things that were done to us, everything can heal. Both are going to require the help of God to do so. But all of it can be washed away so that we can step forward and never have those things come out. Now we say, I would never ever hurt a child. Yeah, but if indeed you had things in your life that were filled with arrogance and greed and lust, then there's something that you call trauma transfer, okay? And this is why it's important to look in the mirror, everybody. So let's just, it works like this. A guy goes to work and, he's mad at something, whatever, and he yells at one of his employees, and that employee goes home and, he's maybe hits his wife or whatever. And then his wife, she yells at the little boy because he hadn't finished his homework. The little boy kicks the dog, right? That trauma transfers from one person to another because nobody was healed enough to stop that chain reaction. Now, let's imagine now that that's you and you're at work and you have employees and you had a bad day. You haven't figured out how to handle your anger issues and your temper and your how you treat other people. You've got a bunch of arrogance and whatever else involved. And you speak unkindly in a way that was totally out of line to one of your employees. And what you didn't realize is that employee was abused sexually as a child himself. And he's been dealing with anxiety and depression and anger issues. And he just got a divorce with his wife because of his insatiable pornography addiction. And he has a little 11-year-old girl at home. And she has her cousin that happens to be coming over that weekend. And he's been satisfying himself with alcohol and pornography and whatever else. And your actions pushes him over the edge. Now, you don't have to take all the responsibility. Yes, he has to take responsibility for what he did, but we all have to look in the mirror and say, how am I adding to the good in the world? And how am I taking away from that good and adding to the evil in the world by my actions? So that's really the answer. It's the man in the mirror. I love the story of the guy. He's sitting on his couch and he's reading the newspaper, and his little boy comes in and says, "Hey, Daddy, can you play baseball with me today?" He goes, No, I'm busy. He's not really busy. He's just reading the newspaper, right? He doesn't want to get up. And the little boy bugs him again and again. Pretty soon, the guy's like, "You know what?" And he sees there's a picture of the world, a globe, a full globe on one of map on one of the pages of the newspaper, and he tears it out, and he tears it up into little pieces of paper, and he throws it on the floor. He says to the little boy, "You need to learn your geography. You tape together all the pieces of that map of the world. All the countries have to be perfect. You tape it all together, and you bring it back to me, and once it's all taped together, then I'll go play baseball with you." It was like just a few minutes later, less than 5 minutes later, this little boy comes back and everything is taped perfectly. This entire map of the world is perfect. And the man's like, "How did you do that?" And the little boy turns it over and says, "Well, there was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together and the whole world made sense." That's the answer, guys. It's the person in the mirror. You work on them, and that ripple effect of good will transfer over, and eventually in one generation we can help enough people heal where we don't have the demand for trafficking, where we don't have that generational trauma within our own homes, where we don't have domestic abuse and violence, physical, verbal, sexual abuse, etc. We can fix this, but we have to elevate global consciousness. We all have to turn to that still small voice of truth. We have to look heavenward. We have to feel into our heart. And in doing so, I believe that we'll fix this problem.
I love so much about this conversation, Paul. So much about this conversation. Starting chronologically, you have created tremendous wealth in your life, and most people are aspiring to create wealth. They think that's the meaning of life. That's where their success is going to be. That's where they're going to feel fulfilled. On the Empowered Life podcast, we say this every episode at least twice, that the greatest gift that you can give is to give selfless of yourself every day in every single way. And that in doing that, it's going to give you the greatest levels of joy, fulfillment, and freedom. I work with billionaires. I work with people with high net incomes. I work with their companies. I find the happiest people are always the people that just understand that formula of just selflessly giving. I love to remind people that everything that's ever happened in life is preparing you for who you get to become, where you're going. Your wealth gave you the ability to do something about something when an opportunity arose. People that may know your story, and I'm going to really paraphrase here, we don't need to go into the details because people could just go anywhere on the internet to find this information, but your whole life have always been involved in some form of improving or embedment in children. You were part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation for 7 years. You were with the Ronald McDonald House. You've had all these different interests long before you got into the liberation of sex trafficked children. And that, yes, led you into where you went to for the last 10 years, or for that 10-year period. But it is also what's led you to where you are today. But I want to ask a question right up front, and I'm going to again set a little bit of a foundation. I work in companies, and I openly share on the podcast that on average around 60%, and I don't track this day by day, but around about 60% of the people that I work with in corporate America have been sexually abused or assaulted at some point in time. So that is far greater than the 1 in 4 women and the 1 in 5 men. And I'm talking about parents, grandparents, uncles, or abductions. It's a lot. I was sexually assaulted when I was 6 years old by an older female cousin. She was a teenager. And at the time, I didn't know if this was something I was supposed to be enjoying or not. I didn't have the understanding to know what it was. I didn't process it as trauma at the time. I just buried it. I was embarrassed. I was shameful. I was like, "Ooh, I did something I wasn't supposed to do." But I didn't know what it was. And it obviously has brought up a tremendous amount of emotion in me later in life, which I've thankfully healed. I believe that that experience prepared me to be who I am today. And today I get to help people heal from that, to hold a woman whose child's just been raped, or to console somebody who is a grown woman today, but spent 7 years being abused by her grandfather. I can relate to someone. I don't have the same experience, but I'm qualified to do it. I don't only work in abuse. I'm just in all areas of high performance in human behavior, but understanding that we have those experiences. I would love to know, because in all my research, I didn't find a single thing that pointed to me that was a catalyst for your deep desire to impact children positively. Was there an experience from your childhood where you said, I really want to make a difference in children's lives. I want to work. Where did that come from? Because it has been a consistent theme throughout your life of wanting to create that impact in children. Was there a catalytic event?
There were, in my personal life, I was tremendously blessed that I was not sexually abused as a child. I had a lot of bullying. Um, I remember walking home one day and I told my mom I want to be a brain surgeon when I grow up. She goes, "Why a brain surgeon?" "Well, I want to fix how people think, because I was just being bullied." And later I changed that to I wanted to be a heart surgeon, because I realized, I think innately, that the key to fixing up here is fixing down here in your heart. And but moving forward, after in my early adulthood, I came to a realization that some very, very close family members had been abused, and sexually abused and physically abused, and in a very, very bad way. And and that was super heavy for me. I wished with everything in me that I could have gone back, that I could have seen the signs, that I could have been there for them, that I could have rescued them before that happened. And I was oblivious to them. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what the signs were. I didn't know that it was as prevalent. And you're exactly right, Rudi. Those numbers that I quoted are ones that are widely on the internet, of people who have outwardly admitted. The average age of somebody admitting their sexual abuse as a child, is 52 years old. That's my age. And most men never talk about it at all. They hold that pain inside. And because of that, it affects them in so many negative ways, in sexual promiscuity and anger issues and self-esteem and anxiety and depression and physical, verbal, sexual abuse of others, et cetera. And so it's so important that we find ways to help humanity heal. But, I have not yet been given permission from those family members to publicly disclose who they are, but they were very close, and it hurt very badly. Because I was always a protector. I had 4 sisters, and I loved them. They were all younger than me, and I would take a bullet for any one of them. And there are so many beautiful people in this world who are carrying so much pain. And so, my goal after that was, how do I help now that this has happened. I had a company in my early 20s that helped people overcome anxiety and depression and PTSD and addictions. I had 50,000 people a month calling in off of my infomercial to help get the help that they needed. And we were effective. We had a 12-week program with a personal coach that was very effective at helping people break free of these pains. Our healing retreats now are 4-day, fully immersive, transformational experiences that get more done than 10, 20 years worth of therapy. And, I've been in that business for a long time, and I understand what needs to happen to have people release those things that don't, that are tearing them apart inside. And so, for me, I'm incredibly blessed that I was protected as a child, but those closest to me were not. And that's what hurt the most.
I want to start talking a little bit about the work that you're doing today. And again, for the benefit of the audience, I want to just really emphasize you built by any measure, a profoundly successful company. I mean, I think it's 48 billion in assets under management. Um, you yourself are profoundly successful and wealthy, and then you get into something that, like, we only ever see in the movies. Literally, like, for the average person, you go undercover, you put yourself in harm's way, you put your life in harm's way, you put your family in harm's way. You have to come up with these aliases. You're two different people living this different life. You're coming up against the loving family that you have, and then you up against the worst possible people. You do this for 10 years. You realize after 10 years you are literally just taking people out, but there's a vacuum that's drawing people in. And even though you've saved 5,000 lives, you haven't changed anything. And I'm paraphrasing because you've changed so much. So I don't want to belittle the insane volume of impact you've created in the world. But I love that you've said in the episode today, you wanted to solution the problem, right? And that is to go back to that initial core. I heard you talk about Jerry Preen and a conversation that you had with Jerry Preen. I would love for you to share with the audience who is Jerry Preen, and then what is it exactly that Jerry had shared with you, because I think that is the driving force, and you could correct me, but behind why you today are wanting to solve people. Um, I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, but for the benefit of wanting to help people before they become what they could.
The Jerry thing is super important for everyone. I start out my book that I'm writing. It'll come out sometime next year or end of this year, called "Are You Listening with My Hand on My Heart?" Not "Are you listening with my hand on my ear?" but "Are you listening here?" I believe that everybody has the ability to tune in to that still small voice of truth to help guide them in the important areas of their life. In my early 20s, I was introduced to a guy named Jerry Prine. Jerry unfortunately died in 2010. He was a great man. Jerry had he couldn't read. If third grade education, if that, dropped out of school in elementary school. Yet Jerry was tested as the highest IQ ever tested at the University of Utah, one of the highest IQs in the world at the time. And he said to me, we went to lunch. Somebody introduced him to him, and he said to me, Paul, he said, you could have an IQ over 200 as well. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm really not that smart. I worked really hard to get decent grades. I didn't even get a scholarship, right? And plus, I don't think you can change your IQ. And he goes, no. He said, the difference between me and you is that I listen better than you. I said, you listen better than me? And I put my hand on my ear. He goes, no, I listen better than you. And he put his hand on his heart. He said, tell me this, Paul. He said, do you think that, now, he was the inventor of countless medical devices, life-saving medical. The original software that I don't think it was Siri, but the voice recognition stuff on your phone, the original software that IBM used in voice recognition stuff. He was the original inventor of it. He didn't even read, right? And he said to me, do you think that I'm the inventor of that voice recognition technology that IBM is using? I'm like, you have the patents, right? He goes, yeah, I do. I said, you're not the inventor? He goes, no, I'm not the inventor of that or any of those medical devices, any of that stuff. It was an earlier version of the wireless microphone, a whole bunch of stuff. And he said, I said, you're not the inventor? He goes, well, not really. He said, how how long has the universe been around? I'm like, I don't know, millions of years. He said, billions upon billions of years. He said those medical devices were invented billions of years ago. I was just a better listener than you. And I turned my head. I'm like, I don't quite understand. He said, you need to understand that we live in a world of universal truth. He said, the problem is we spend all this time with all this chatter thinking that relying upon the arm of flesh and upon books that we read. He said, imagine this. He said, your mind, not just your conscious mind, but your subconscious and the tapping into the superconscious. He says, it's like having access to a massive supercomputer with infinite high-speed connections with all the information, not only in the known world, but the known universe, literally everything that is there. He said, and unfortunately, we spend our lives loading information into our supercomputer with those little 3-inch floppy disks that we used to have, right? So he says, we spend our time just slow loading this stuff through the things that we read, the things that we listen to, the things that he said, imagine just being able to access all of it. He said, it's all there. Every bit of it is there. And I won't go into long details on it, but understand this, by using those principles of tapping into that universal truth, of tapping into that higher consciousness, tapping into that divine inspiration from God, it not only will help you in pursuing your business goals, but it'll help you in your personal life. Every single undercover mission, we weren't following logic and protocol in finding these children. I truly believe that we were being led to where the children were, led to the things that we needed to do and say to get them out of harm's way, led to what needed to happen to keep our team safe. And so that was a huge transition for me in my early 20s. And that's how how does somebody build a multi-billion-dollar company? Well, you're not a University of Utah dropout, right? That's what I am. There were some other principles that really played a role in helping to create a successful business of that size. Now, I didn't build it to 48 billion. I retired before it was even 20 billion, but I'm still an owner, still a founder, still get checks every day. There's thousands of really smart people that are running the company with or without me that ended up taking it public later, et cetera. But building it to that point. In fact, John and I, in the very beginning, people say, John, did you see it? Did you know you guys were going to build that big? He goes, no, but somehow Paul saw it and visualized it and tuned into that energy. He said, we'd be in making phone calls, a deal we needed $25,000 by Friday. He said, and Paul would make phone calls and then he'd hang up the phone. He turned around, he put his finger to his little pinky to his mouth, kind of the Austin Powers thing, and, put his pinky to his mouth. And I said, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. And he's like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday, right? $1 billion, that's a big number right now. But seeing that and attracting that into our lives is indeed what created it. And that's how I helped build a multi-billion-dollar company. That's how I helped find the children. That's how I ended up finally having a super healthy, loving relationship in my interpersonal life, et cetera. So that's a beautiful, beautiful question and a beautiful road that it took me down.
I am going to probably quote his name thousands and thousands and thousands of times over the course of my life because I love that example so beautifully. I would love for you to take that principle. It doesn't have to be long because I want to move into the actual work you're doing now, which I think there's so much value in. But I would love to ground that for everyday people doing everyday things. How can we listen better in our everyday to guide us in our life?
I will. I'll take you through just a 3-minute overview of my guided meditation. So, what I do is I have to figure out how to turn off the monkey brain, right? The chatter that's going on all the time. And this includes in your prayers, guys. So many times in your prayers, you're thinking about what's going to happen, think of the past. It's all future past, and nobody lives in the now. Nobody really tunes into this present moment in time. And nobody really turns off all of that extra chatter. So finding ways to turn off that extra chatter and learn how to listen from that place of the heart. Now, to me, remember those old radios where we had to tune in to just the right channel? Otherwise, a bunch of static would happen in between all the channels. You have to just tune it just right? Well, that's the same thing when you're listening, is learning how to tune in to that channel, just that fine tuning. Everything is energy. Everything is frequency. Everything. One of the famous quotes by Nikola Tesla was that if you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That's everything. Everything is that energy. Everything is that frequency. So to me, I say, okay, if I'm going to tune in to that frequency of God, what is that? What's the frequency of God? Well, I believe that the frequency of God is eternal, infinite, unconditional love, right? And so if I'm going to tune into that frequency, I start out by thinking in my mind. I turn off my brain with, I have distractions all set off. I have an eye mask, and I have headphones that are playing like 532 hertz or 432 hertz or, 9, I don't even know all the different ones, but different, sound bowl music and stuff like that I no beats, no words, no anything like that are just kind of putting my mind into this meditative state. And then I focus on unconditional love. I focus on what's easy, love for my dogs, love for my daughter, love for my kids, love for my wife. And I then mirror that same unconditional godlike love for the rest of humanity. And I just feel in that vibration, feel in that frequency. And other super high frequency for me, especially in the process of manifestation, is the frequency of gratitude. And so I focus on the things in my past that I'm deeply grateful for. And I tune into that frequency because that's easy. There are things in my past that got me to where I am. It's easy to, and then I think about the things in my present life and even things that are out of alignment that in my past that got me to where I am now. I tune into that just infinite gratitude. And then I start thinking about the future and what I'm creating, co-creating with God in the future. And I feel into that gratitude. I believe that gratitude for things that do not exist yet today in your life is the purest form of faith. Right. And so by tuning into that energy, now I can start turning off my mind. I use some different breathwork exercises. I have a DMT release and a holotropic breathwork exercise that I use to get myself completely focused on my breath and turn off all of the extra distractions so that I can tune in and then start asking questions. What do I need to do in this situation, and where should I go here, and the answers will come in a very beautiful, very clear, very perfect way when you turn off all of the I think this to I'm ready to receive, I'm ready to listen.
I'm so glad that you went there. I've dedicated my life to that topic, of getting people to connect to their highest and greatest self, where we have access to everything that ever was, is, and will ever be. And it's in that co-creation with God that we find our greatest potential. And so I love that you do that every single day. And I love that you share that with us on the podcast. Um, you host events now, and you help and support people in a very short amount of time. You had alluded to earlier, 20 years of therapy you can do in 1 to 4 days, and you have a very unique approach to doing this. I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about what does that look like, what is the event, and how could somebody get involved in that, and who is the ideal person to attend?
Absolutely. Well, and this part, for some people it might be a little bit triggering, like our beginning, but hold on and just hear me through. I've been friends with RFK for over 10 years. Kennedy was at Sundance years ago and became friends there, and he's now coming into the scene in the new presidential cabinet that he's going to help take down some negative things in our environment, big pharma and food that's not good for us, et cetera. And as part of his commitments, he is committed to decriminalize the use of certain types of what I'm going to call plant medicine in trauma healing in personal development, progress, etc. So I'm gonna walk you through this so that you can do your own research on this, guys. In the late 60s, President Nixon decided to throw a whole bunch of things under the bus and classify them as Schedule 1 drugs. What I'm talking about is psychedelics. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not a fan whatsoever of somebody going to a rave party and getting high on mushrooms, okay? This is not what we're talking about. But if you look at the studies done by Johns Hopkins University, you'll realize that there are very few things that have more promise and more success in helping people reprogram parts of their subconscious mind. And so what had happened in my personal life 8+ years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson, I was Paul effing Hutchinson, right? I had two I had 2 helicopters, I had a jet, I had a house with 10 bathrooms and seven fireplaces and 3 kitchens and a basketball court in my basement, and which is okay. It's okay. But I was also having massive parties at my house with NBA players and half-dressed girls every other weekend. I was on my second marriage, headed for a divorce, wondering why things weren't working. Right now, I was doing some undercover work, but in reality, it was adding to that ego side, and it was heavy. And I was maybe a year and a half into the undercover work, and I had a phone call from 2 of my operators, and we were burning through operators, PTSD, guys with 300 missions in Afghanistan, 1 undercover mission, seeing a menu with children for sale just screwed them up, and they're just, ugh. And so what happened is these guys said, Paul, they called me up and they said, Paul, do you trust us? I said, yeah, I literally trust you with my life. Undercover, I in charge of talking, they're in charge of making sure I don't die. They said, you need to come with us to this transformational retreat. It's going to be the most transformational thing you've ever done in your life. And I said, now that's saying something. I know Tony Robbins personally. I literally stood next to him last time I walked across the fire with my bare feet, right? I've done transformational things. And they said, this doctor has identified ways to help people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions in a very short period of time, a matter of days. And I'm like, what? I said, now you're full of crap, because my company in my early 20s, I sold it for $20 million. That's what we did. I'm really good at this. We had cognitive restructuring programs and helping people get off of medications by helping them change the negative habit patterns of thought. But it took us like 12 weeks. There's no way you can do it faster. And then they said this doctor has traveled around the world and identified different types of plants that have different psychoactive properties. And they gave me a bunch of material and some links, and I looked at, and I came to an understanding that when between the time that we're 0, when we're born, to about 7 years old, our mind is in a state of what you might call neuroplasticity, right? Very susceptible. You know, you're Rudi, yes, 6 years old, you know, you went through a traumatic experience, and it was very susceptible to your subconscious mind at that point. And what happens is our subconscious mind drives almost 99% of our day. Literally, you know, after we learn how to drive, it's driving. We're thinking about our meeting. We're not thinking about the gas pedal and whatever else, right? Our subconscious mind really, once we train it, is doing a lot of things. And if we're holding on, if we have some heavy things that happen to us as a child, or even not even as a child, later in life, these heavy things, and they imprint themselves on our subconscious mind no longer holds on to that, or no longer is in that state of neuroplasticity. It's in a state where it's super hardened, and it takes a long time and a lot of repetition of new, verbal things that you say to yourself and affirmations to be able to break free of it. Well, what I found out is that some of these plants, like ayahuasca, like psilocybin, like others, can put the mind in a temporary state of neuroplasticity. Now, when you are in that state and you have a trained facilitator and you come into it with a clear intention and you're saying, okay, these are things I want to release and fix and whatever else, in that state of neuroplasticity is as if you're able to take this, this Play-Doh, your mold of your subconscious mind that is frozen in time and is super hard to fix, say, okay, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix this. And so what happened for me? And sometimes what we call the medicine, this was a psilocybin experience. For me, what happened? I went into this first experience and I was kind of open. I'm like, okay, I don't need to fix anything. I don't need to heal anything, but they knew I needed to heal some stuff. And Rudi, my first experience was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. For about 3 hours, I felt complete, perfect empathy like you cannot imagine. I felt in every cell of my body as if I were my children. I could feel the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom. And it was so heavy. And it was so dark and it was so painful. And then the medicine took me to this state of infinite joy. And I could feel as if I was the children that we helped to liberate and rescue from trafficking. And then it took me back into hell again and the pain of the families that I had negatively affected because some guy was at one of my parties and got drunk and slept with a girl there and broke up his family. And I realized even my employees that I spoke out of alignment with and whatever, and I could feel the joy and the pain of every word, every action of my life, and that ripple effect that it was having on other people. And it changed everything for me in breaking down that arrogant ego of that Paul Hutchinson. And then I did a bunch of more research and I realized how effective it was with things like PTSD. So we brought in a bunch of our operators, undercover guys who had dealt with literally coming home from military service, get a stamp on their medical records for life that they've got PTSD forever because of what they did in the military. And their wives are on Xanax and Zoloft and all these anxiety, depression medications and have been for decades. And we're able to get them off of that medication in just a few days. It was just phenomenal. And then we started bringing in women who had dealt with childhood trauma, that were abused and all this heavy stuff. And so I went into our attorney general, who helped me get into the child trafficking, anti-child trafficking work. And I said, bro, this is so powerful, so effective. I lived in Utah at the time. I said, I'm going to bring it to Utah. You can either arrest me or tell me how to make it legal. And he laughed. He said, well, let's figure out how to make it legal. And Utah was almost not only decriminalized, but we were almost the first state to fully legalize the use of psychedelics and trauma therapy and helping people release that stuff because it was so incredibly effective. And here's the thing. My entire life, I thought these things were as dangerous as cocaine. Do your research on it. Psilocybin is safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction. There's never been a case of overdose. You Google alcohol versus psilocybin dangers. You'll see this massive chart. Alcohol right at the top in danger to self and danger to others. Number one. Second only to that is crack cocaine and then methamphetamine and regular cocaine. Like 20 down is cannabis. All the way at the bottom, almost zero harm to self and others is psilocybin. So why is it a Schedule I drug? Well, actually, that's an hour-long conversation there of why they threw it there. But the truth is, when used with a trained facilitator, and we have people come down for 4 or 5 day fully immersive transformational experiences. We had to move it to Colombia because our governor in Utah decided he wanted to veto our bill. And so we had to put that on hold until it's legal on a national scale. So we're in Latin America and people come down. You can go on to liberatinghumanity.com and get some more information there. It's not, people say, oh, I don't know, I'm scared of this isn't a drug, guys. It's exactly the opposite. There's actually doctors in Peru that have over an 85% success rate in helping people get off of addictions to cocaine and heroin and hardcore drugs using some of these psychedelic tools. And so do your research, open your mind as to what it is, but again, don't go get high at a rave party with friends because your neuroplasticity in that kind of an energy environment is not going to be good for you. But you do it with a trained facilitator in the right space, it will be completely transformational.
I have done my research, and my wife and I just dived into a rabbit hole. It started with watching a documentary on Hulu at one point, and then it took us to Netflix, and just all these different series that had started to come out just on the topic and how we have been misrepresented, or the drugs have been misrepresented, and the benefits and the healing and the success rates in Germany, as an example, where this is legally being done in their system. And I just think it's incredible. And I think that there is a lot of need in the world for people to do it, whether they are attending a Dr. Joe Dispenza meditative retreat and they're healing their PTSD through that, or whether they're attending your events and, within 4 days having profound shifts in their lives. My selfish agenda in this episode today is just to encourage people to start having the conversation. All day long, you have done that for us. You've started with, we need to look at ourselves, and we need to look at how are we either adding to or taking from the problem, and then what can we do differently, and how can we be the example. And then you're now turning around and teaching that. If I was to look at every single guest that's ever been on the Empowered Life podcast, and we've had some unbelievably incredible human beings here, I would put you at the top of the list of the most successful people I've ever had the privilege of talking to. And I do not mean dollars. Your life is of giving of yourself in such a beautiful way. Even sharing that, a year into doing all of this work, you were still hosting parties and being the guy. And then you realized, wow, there's so many layers to this that we just need to learn and to grow. I just hope that every single person that listens to this is going to look in the mirror today a little differently than they did before they heard this episode. Paul, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, with every fiber of my soul, that you are the man that you are, and that you're showing up the way that you're showing up. And then I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for the impact. If people want to reach you, and we're going to put all of your information in the show notes, but what would be the best place for somebody who wants to learn a little bit more about you, or about your retreats, or to buy your books? I know you alluded to one, you're in the process of 3. But if we were just wanted to get to know you a little further, or how we can support you in your work, where would be the best place?
Thank you, Rudi. On all social media platforms, it's just Liberating Humanity. On Instagram, on TikTok, if it's still alive in a week, on Facebook, etc. Liberating Humanity. LinkedIn, I'm just Paul Hutchinson. But you can go to liberatinghumanity.com. You can either, and if you're driving, you can't remember Liberating Humanity, but you remember Sound of Freedom, go to soundoffreedombook.com, and it'll take you right into Liberating Humanity website there, and where you can pre-order the book. If you want to get involved with the foundation directly, there are links on Liberating Humanity that'll take you into the foundation, but you can go into Child Liberation Foundation. You can look that up online, or just childliberation.org, and get involved there. The last book of Malachi talks about giving up to 10%. I believe it should be a minimum of 10% to making the world a better place. And with the promise, it says, prove me now herewith, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, that there will not be room enough to receive it. And I have seen that directly in my life, in my charitable pursuits, and those blessings from God that come in so many ways in doing so. And so I encourage people, donate $50 a month, donate $100 a month, donate even $25 a month to these children. You can see some of the things that we're doing with the safe houses, with the programs of awareness, and even continuing to fund some of your operators that are out doing the rescues of the kids. So would love your help with childliberation.org or liberatinghumanity.com.
Man, Paul, I have so much love for you, brother. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for being you, and thank you for leading by example. For everybody who has just tuned in and listened to this entire incredible, powerful episode, I want to challenge you to look in the mirror today and ask yourself, what has happened and or transpired in your life that's preparing you for the person that you get to become. And if you could be as open as Paul has been to mold and change and learn and to grow, then you could live a truly profound life that rivals anyone who has ever walked the face of the earth. And, I believe that you're connected to a tapestry that is so powerful and so grand, and that there's something so deeply profound that you've come here to do, but we need to have that level of awareness to be able to do it and to achieve it. And then I have one more very selfish ask of everybody, and that is just to give, donate, do something, because everything that you add to, whether it's this foundation or another, is going to support somebody to create the impact that they're working on, and it helps. Every cent helps. So thank you so much for joining. Tag us in any comments that you have. Share this with anybody who you think might resonate with this message, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast. I love you guys.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.